nor the body, nor the rest of the body, and he's never identified either. So one thing that I'm wondering is where the heck are the rest of these body parts? Are they
Yeah.
still
There's somewhere down there, and
Cleveland?
yeah.
If you live in Cleveland, go look for this place. Or I would love to go to this place and see if there's paranormal activity. Because I don't know how you wouldn't have paranormal activity at a place like this. But um, so number 7 that's discovered is Jane Doe number 1. She's known as the Lady of the Lake, and her head was never found. And they say that she could have been dead for up to 6 months before she was found. And they also speculated that she spent at least half that time in some body of water. So the Lady of the Lake becomes pretty famous. If you look that up, that's one of the things that you actually read about the most was the Lady of the Lake that washes up. So the coroner believes that the killer had also applied the same chemical to her in order to help dissolve or disintegrate her body parts. But again, the killer did not understand that this wasn't the place or wasn't the thing to use, and he unintentionally preserves the body. So, number 8, we have Jane Doe number 2, and they find all of her body except for one rib. So, she's missing a rib.
She's missing one rib.
That's it. Yeah. So, her one rib is never found. Her head was recovered, however. So, at least they did recover that part. Number 9, we have John Doe number 5. And this is so weird to me. There's no like rhyme or reason to who this killer is going after. It's men, women, it's prostitutes, it's gamblers, it's I don't really know. There were a few of them that they thought did frequent the bars. Edward Andrassy was said to be pretty a pretty big regular at some of the bars downtown in the Roaring Third. And so maybe that's where he was finding his victims and just whoever was easy prey or at the time, I don't know, but it just seems so weird because there's no rhyme or reason to any of this, but there's no like pattern of men, women, anything or age group or anything like that. So John Doe number 5 is the 9th person to be recovered. And they do recover all of his body, but the head is never found. So, again, where are the heads in Cleveland? So, number 10, we have Jane Doe number 3. And initially, they only find a lower leg of Jane Doe number 3. So, 3 weeks later, a human thigh is just seen floating in the river. So, if you're in the area, you don't want to go swimming in the river at this time. And also another thing that stood out to me is that a lot of these people that were finding these victims were kids. They were like teenagers, young kids, just walking around on their own. And so if you have a serial killer that's out on the loose, that's decapitating people, why are you letting your teenagers out to walk by themselves? I don't get it. One was actually like out walking around in the trash heaps because I think that's just what everything looked like. There was a lot of heaps of trash and actually stumbled over a torso. So if you can imagine just a normal day walking around in your neighborhood and stumbling over a torso, this is a crazy time. So again, about 3 weeks later, they find the human thigh just floating in the river, and police search and they find a burlap sack that's containing a victim's headless torso, and it's cut into 2 halves, and it's also has another thigh and a left foot in the bag. This is the only victim that's ever found to have drugs in her system, and the rest of her body is never found either. So, number 11, we're in the double digits and we're going strong still. So, Jane Doe number 4 is found decapitated and her head was recovered. And she is actually found with the 12th victim. They're found together. He's known as John Doe number 6. He was never fully identified. They were discovered together. Her head again was recovered, and his head was found in a can. So, all in all, they say the official number of murders attributed to the Cleveland torso murderer is 12. So, 7 men, 5 women. But now they're actually going back and they're looking at different theories and different cases that were happening. And some people actually believe that the victims could have ranged up to upwards of 20 people. And there are also theories that say that the murders could have been happening for over a 30-year span.
Wow.
So it's a pretty crazy time. Not that we wanted to be there in the Great Depression time anyway. It doesn't sound like a good time, but this is pretty crazy to live through, I would think. So we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the suspects and who we think did it. Hey guys, have you thought about making your own podcast but you're not really sure where to start? That's how I was at first, and really the only choice that stood out to me was Anchor. And let me tell you why. It was completely free to start, and it has all the tools that allow me to record and edit my podcast right from my phone or computer. And they distribute the podcast for me, so it's heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms. There's no minimum listenership, and you can start making money from day one. And really everything you need to make your podcast is all in one place. I love it, and I know you will too. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Okay, we're back from the break. We are going to talk a little bit more about who the suspects were and what they did to find these people. So at some point they bring in the safety director of Cleveland. His name is Elliot Ness. Have you ever heard of Elliot Ness?
Haven't.
I swear that he's in a rap song, that name is in one of the Fuji songs. I don't know if it's the same one. But this guy was famous for one thing, as far as I know, and one thing only, but he helped to bring down Al Capone during the Prohibition. So that was his claim to fame. So that's kind of a big deal. He's a big deal. So Elliot has an idea. He thinks that in order to help the situation, let's just help these people in the shanty towns, right? So in an effort to help them, he, early on August 18th, 1938, sends 25 men into the hobo jungle. And what they do is they set up these blockades to make sure that nobody can get out. They round everyone up and they take them to the police station. So each shack is basically like a big shakedown. They take all these people, round them up, and they go to the police station. And while they're gone, while the people are at the police station, their shacks are torn down and burned. So these people already had nothing. And they're destitute, they're living with nothing, and then they go and burn down the very little that they did have. So this is a bad idea, Elliot. This is terrible. So every person at the station is required to submit their fingerprints, and not so much in an effort to find the Mad Butcher, but just in case they become the next victim. They have an easier way to identify him. Because I guess they're getting tired of not being able to identify the victims rather than catching the killer. They're worried about the quick identification. So I'm not sure. He was, again, the safety director. I'm not sure he was the greatest homicide detective, but public opinion of him soon changed after this debacle. So we'll get into the suspects and we'll talk about our own theories here. So Dr. Sweeney is suspect number 1. So his name is Dr. Francis E. Sweeney. He's a World War I veteran, and he's part of a medical unit that conducts amputations in the field. So this seems like a pretty good prospect for a guy that might have been able to do such the decapitations, the dismemberments, and things like that. So he's brought in and he's interviewed by Elliot Ness, and during the interrogation, he doesn't pass 2 of the polygraph tests. So, one thing that was weird to me is that this is almost 100 years ago, and I can't believe they had polygraphs at this
No,
time.
that's crazy.
I
I'm
don't
sure
know.
they weren't very accurate.
I wouldn't think they were very accurate. I don't know what an early 1938 polygraph would have looked like, but I'm not picturing it to be the best. If we still can't rely on them in a court of law, I'm not sure that almost 100 years ago they were the best method, but again, he doesn't pass them. And he doesn't pass two of them. So the guy that's doing the polygraph actually tells Ness, "This is the guy. This is your man. You don't even have to look anymore. This is him." So it seems like they've got like an open and shut kind of a case with this guy, except for Ness is thinking that that's going to be not possible to prosecute this guy because he's the cousin of a congressman, and his name is Martin Sweeney, and he's also one of Ness's biggest critics. And so he's been kind of a political opponent of Ness, and he's also been publicly hounding Ness because he's not able to catch the killer. So he's out kind of taunting him and hounding him and making things worse for him. And so Dr. Sweeney is not really the best possibility as far as getting a prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Sweeney has some other problems besides this happening. So he is actually schizophrenic, he's an alcoholic, and he's struggling a little bit with mental health issues, addiction issues, and he checks himself. I don't understand I'm sorry. We got dogs everywhere. But he checks himself into sort of a voluntary stay in a mental hospital. So from the hospital confinement, he actually starts sending these really bizarre postcards to harass Elliot Ness and even his family. So here is a good example of one that he sent with his little picture, and he doesn't look like he's doing the best mentally, maybe. And a lot of the messages on the postcards that I found were just, I couldn't make sense of any of it. Very cryptic and really, really bizarre. So he doesn't seem like he's in a very good place mentally at all. One thing, though, once he gets admitted into the hospital, the murders stop. And so it just seems like maybe this was the guy. So let's go on to suspect number 2. We have Frank Dozil. So he is arrested by sheriff deputies in July 1939. He's 52 years old, and he does confess to killing Flo Polillo. So seems like maybe that's the guy, right? I mean, I could be persuaded now. But later he goes on and he recants the whole confession, and he says that he was actually beaten and made to confess. So then, before he could even testify about this, he is actually found dead in August of 1939, and he hung himself in his jail cell. So, makes me wonder, did he really hang himself, or was he killed before his trial? So, the coroner does rule the death a suicide, but a lot of people, and me included, don't believe that Dozil was actually had committed suicide. I think he was murdered. So again, he was never able to testify, and really, despite them being able to investigate it, they never really had sufficient evidence to say that yes, this was. They couldn't even make a case against him, really, except for the confession that they said they had against him. So a lot of the things in his confession too weren't even correct. A lot of the case details that he was saying actually didn't even happen. It didn't happen the way he confessed it. So number 3, magical number 3 here. Maybe third time is the charm on this suspect.
Hopefully.
We've got Willie Johnson. He's known as One-Armed Willie, and he was said to be in a relationship with one of the victims, who was identified as Rose. And also,